Wyatt Flores, welcome to Biscuits and Jam.
Well, thanks for having me.
Where am I reaching you right now?
Right now, I'm in Nashville.
This is your hometown now, right?
Negative. I
It's
lived here
not.
for 2 years, and I was like, I'm going to get out of here.
Oh, you're back in Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah.
That's been a good move for you to be back home.
You know, there just came a point where I was like, we're renting a house for so much money that's 30 minutes out of town, and it's too much money, especially when the landlords won't fix the black mold problem. And I was like, I can afford 2 houses back home in Oklahoma for the price that I'm paying for this one that's just awful.
Yeah. But I guess you're still spending a good amount of time in Nashville.
Oh, yeah. I still come back here a lot, but I enjoy visiting more than I do living here.
Was that 2 years a good education for you? Just kind of getting the lay of the land and meeting everybody you got to meet and all that?
Yeah, so basically when I moved in, I would have been living in an apartment, and at the time it was a 2-bedroom apartment, but my one manager stayed in that room, and then ended up going a different route. But my soon-to-be manager and my guitar player and I were all sharing one room on air mattresses for about 10 months, I want to say. And then a whole bunch of us moved into a bigger house, and then ended up going a different route. And from that point, ended up being homeless for about 3 weeks, hopping couches, and then found a place down there in, what is that? Goodlettsville. Yeah. Up there.
Talk to me about what your setup is now back home in Oklahoma.
Still building barn dominium currently, and it's a work in progress. The upstairs is coming along just fine. Fixing to do the downstairs now, and I don't know. It feels good to finally have something to call my own, if that makes sense, because I really had never lived in a nice place, I guess, if that makes sense. I've moved so many times in my life, 5 or 7 times that I've moved into different places, and I was like, I got to have something to just call my own.
You're ready to settle down a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. We got really good at moving things in and out of places, though. Thought about starting up a business if the music failed.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
I'm hoping not.
knock wood. So Wyatt, you grew up in Stillwater, Oklahoma, or kind of right outside of town. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. Stillwater, Oklahoma, born and raised.
So you've written songs about it, and you seem to have an interesting relationship with it in some ways. Give me a little education about Stillwater. Tell me about, for someone who has not been there, tell me a little bit about the town.
I believe the population is about 50,000, and it's a college town, and that college town is currently booming like most, but it has this small town feel to it, but then it's not too hard. It's turning into a city more and more, which it is, but it's not too hard to get out of it, if that makes sense. It just turns to countryside pretty quickly. And I always like that dynamic of that town of just being they're in the center. It's got all the city things and all the shopping malls and stuff like that, but it's so easy to leave town. It's 10 minutes outside of town in any direction. It just turns to country.
And you grew up kind of more in the country on a ranch?
Yes, sir.
So, paint me a picture of that place, and when you're kind of driving down the driveway, what does it look like? What does the land look like? And the house, driving up to the house.
Well, usually you got a whole bunch of dogs running down the driveway when you pull in. It's kind of a long driveway. It's not one of those short ones where you just park a car right in the front. Got to go a ways, and then it's got a couple barns on there. Tractor that I haven't seen run in forever. Then there's a whole bunch of metal and stuff because my dad's a welder, so there's just a whole bunch of scrap metal in case we ever want to start up another project.
Yeah.
Mom and dad's house on one side, and then barn on the other, and technically there's 3 ponds, but 2 of them are sewer lagoons, and then you got one main pond and a tree line that runs in the back. All
That's
gravel.
The scene. So Wyatt, did you grow up with a lot of family around? I mean, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents?
Kinda. My grandparents lived 4 hours away on one side of the family, and then the other side of the family was 15 hours down there in San Benito, Texas.
Okay.
Until we brought them up because they started losing their minds to dementia, and I think I probably was in the fifth grade when me and my dad took a stock trailer down there and moved all their stuff up to Stillwater so we could kind of take care of them, and which is where I get like songs like "Forget Your Voice" of just being a kid and watching them forget who you are, and that's just a strange experience. And I learned quite a bit of Spanish, more than I ever did in the classroom, but it's kind of it's all falling away. Don't use it, and then all of a sudden you lose it. But then my aunts and uncles and stuff, they all live down in like OKC and Tuttle, and my grandma still lives out there in the Panhandle, and we're kind of dispersed. Not too much family living there in Stillwater.
Would you guys get together for a big family gathering every now and then, maybe around the
No,
holidays?
especially the holidays. That's definitely when we get everyone together, and either that or shoot, they'll just come up to the house. Either that or we'll go down to Choctaw, and we do our best. But everyone's goodness, we're all busy. And then nowadays, I'm getting to see more of my older cousins. Shoot, just 2 weeks ago, they came down to where were we? St. Petersburg, Florida, and we all spent the weekend there after I played one of my shows. And my uncle lives down there in Fort Myers area, and so yeah, I've been getting to see them a lot more. But Tracy, she's got kids now, and watching them grow up is crazy. Just goodness,
How
time
fast
is
it
flying.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Well, and you're only what, 23, 24?
Yeah, 23.
So yeah, you've lived a lot of lives for 23, haven't you?
It feels like it. Yeah, I feel like every single time I get a haircut, it's like another cutoff of another life.
Well, so when y'all have these gatherings, is there music involved? It seems like, I mean, your dad's a musician, and it seems like you've got a lot of music in your family. Is that a big part of it?
Not like we would, because my uncle's the one that taught me how to play guitar, and then my dad was really the one that tried to teach me strumming patterns, and then he taught me how to play drums, of course, since he was a drummer. But on the Mexican side of the family, yeah, there's more music involved, and we'd sit around and I'd just play songs for him and stuff. But really, where the group gatherings of music started was pretty much my childhood. I was lucky enough to have a great childhood of all these families would come together, and we'd all take off and go out to the lake. We all had, fifth wheel bumper pull campers, and then we'd all have boats. And yeah, so all of us kids would just make a whole bunch of forts at whatever lake we were at out of hammocks and tarps and everything like that. And we all had bikes, and then late at night was really where I got the love for music, was watching, my dad, Stephen Cooper and Kelly Green and Scott Lester, all sitting around campfires, drinking whiskey, telling stories that may or may not have been true, and singing cowboy songs. And that's all I wanted to do. It used to just be fun sitting there. And then I was like, I really want to try and figure out what they're doing. So I'd ask questions here and there. And then, I'd just sit there and watch what their hands are doing on the fretboard until I could figure out what was going on. And that's really how I learned. And that was kind of the environment that I grew up in. Like, summertime is my favorite just because of how much time we spent at, different lakes camping. That was the highlight of my childhood.
And when it comes to music, I mean, you really kind of jumped right into this sort of, I don't know, kind of old time music or more country music.
Well,
I mean, you didn't grow up listening to like Van Halen or something.
I could have, but I usually skipped it. It's not that it ain't bad. It just wasn't for my ears, if that makes sense. But yeah, I grew up listening to a lot of songs. Oh, good Lord. My music taste is kind of all over the place, just because even growing up inside the household, my mom was huge on 90s country. She's probably George Strait's number one fan.
Oh, is that right?
And then, oh yeah, I mean, CD after CD after CD, and maybe it's just because I got a little burnt out on it from having to go to school with mom. But I was like, can we like listen to something else maybe? And then my dad, he was huge on blues. It was all blues, so it was a lot of classic rock and Stevie Ray and good Lord, what's the other one? Joe Bonamassa was one of his big ones. But a lot of my influences kind of came from Los Lonely Boys. I got that first album of theirs and had it on my dad's iPod, and I listened to that entire thing, and huge influences there. And then my sister was really the one that kind of kept me up to speed with Red Dirt and more of the rap and the pop and stuff like that, because she was 4 years older than me. So, she had more control over the aux cord than I did.
Yeah, I guess so. I wanted to ask you about the Red Dirt scene. It's not something that I'm super familiar with, but it seems like, there's definitely this really deep music culture that comes out of Oklahoma, and it's very distinctive. And, I think of groups, probably more recent groups like maybe Turnpike Troubadours. But I know it goes back much further than that. Tell me a little bit about that scene and kind of what impact it had on you.
Shoot, it had every piece of impact on me. Especially Kelly and Scott, the ones I was talking about sitting around the fires. Well, they're part of the Great Divide band. So my dad was in the scene, but he never came up with it, I guess. And one of the bands, he had plenty of bands that he played in, but mostly just being with them. And then the Great Divide formed back in college days and took off. But that entire Texas music scene, Red Dirt, it all started there in Stillwater. And, you have the greats like Jimmy LaFay and Tom Skinner that were really the grandfathers of it all. And then it just started taking off. And definitely in the 90s is where it really started to shine, in the early 2000s. And, a lot of those bands ended up breaking up. And, of course, Cross Canadian Ragweed and Great Divide, they both had reunions to where they're coming back. But a lot of it was just the songwriters that would come into town. And it wasn't so much about the actual bands and everything until, they started forming up and started taking off and traveling. But it's the storytelling that goes on inside of Red Dirt, which is why you hear, Turnpike Troubadours. You talk about them, they're some of the best songwriters today, in my opinion. And the truthfully honest, I think in Red Dirt history, they're the king of it.
Yeah.
The storytelling, I just don't find it anywhere else, if that makes sense, because it's got this mix of this rock and roll mixed with country, kind of honky tonk, and then you also have the folk aspect of it all. And really that's kind of where it started, was just mixing the two of folk and this weird grunge era, and it's a hodgepodge, and it's in its own way, if that makes sense.
Do you think there's a sense of pride in the community there? I mean, do you really feel like people, they love that heritage?
Yes, there is, and there's also been times in my life where I thought the scene was starting to die off there for a second, but it's well alive. I mean, considering the fact that Ragweed and Turnpike and Stoney, Jason Boland and Great Divide just played 4 sold-out shows at Boone Pickens Stadium to 186,000 people. I'd say it's well alive.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's amazing. Wyatt, I've got to ask you a little bit about food and just, kind of what you grew up with. We always talk about that a little bit on this podcast, and I'm just wondering, what was some of the food you grew up with, and who was doing the cooking, or the one that, especially that really stands out to you?
I got to give a lot of thanks to my parents, because we didn't have, we had plenty, but we weren't ever, we weren't rich by no means, if that makes sense. I talk a lot about my parents just because I've watched them through the years of building what they have and starting from absolutely nothing. So I love it when I get to talk about this, just because I feel bad for anyone that hasn't had this upbringing, because my mom would get done working, and she's still working. And we'd all get home all of us kids would go to school. We'd come back home. She'd get there, and it was immediately doing all the chores. Me and my sister we both had show cattle, so we were working in the barns with them, and then we'd come inside, start doing homework. Mom's already starting on cooking. And Dad, he'd get home around 6. He'd go feed cows out there, and then he'd come back in, and he'd walk in, usually shake our heads or whatever at the dinner table while we're doing homework, and come in and start cooking with my mom. And I always loved that they'd cook together. But, the meals vary. Since we have our own beef, there was a whole lot of steaks and burgers and stews. But my favorite thing was always on the weekends, because we'd all be there in the mornings and we'd all have breakfast burritos. Was like my favorite thing still to this day. Just them two cooking that, flour tortillas, and then we had plenty of friends with a whole bunch of chickens, so way better than store-bought. And then what we have in Oklahoma is called blue and gold sausage, and bacon as well. But that's, if you ever get the chance, blue and gold sausage, better than Jimmy's, whatever. I don't even know the names of other sausages because it doesn't matter. Blue and gold is the way. And you mix all that together with some hash browns, peel some potatoes, throw it inside of a breakfast burrito, and real nice. Oh,
you can't go wrong.
Some cheese. Can't go wrong. Best way to start a morning.
Talk to me about the Mexican influence.
My mom's carne asada. She learned it from my mom's white, Dad's Mexican, and Spanish, and so she was able to learn some of my grandma's recipes on my dad's side, and yeah, we had quite a bit of Mexican food, but at the same time, we didn't always get into it, if that makes sense. It wasn't too often where we'd do that, just because my mom mostly learned all the recipes from her mom, and my mom can cook. And my dad can too, because my dad is coming back to his college days. When he had nothing, him and his brother, they both lived inside of a little trailer that still sits on the property. I don't even want to know what's living in it now. I've looked in it one time and I was like, I'm not stepping foot. But they sold beans, they make bean burritos and all sorts of food, and they'd sell it. And that's how they were paying for college, because everyone else was eating Whataburger and whatnot, and they didn't have the money to do so. But people wanted their stuff, so they were like, we'll sell it to you. And they were selling food out the back of it. But I don't know. It's been a while since we've really gotten into Mexican food at the house. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's been a while. But usually when we come home, everyone wants to come over, and it's just easier to make cheeseburgers and call it a day.
And what about on your dad's side? What about your dad's mom?
Grandma Ophelia. So like the way his upbringing was, there's 5 kids, and you didn't wait around. You didn't wait around to eat. They'd all be cooking together too. But the way he described it was, there's a pecking order, and you better hurry up and start eating, because everyone else will eat before you if you don't hurry. And I think that's why my dad eats so fast. He'll be the first one done. But I think that's just because of his upbringing, just having to fight since he's the youngest at the table, and yeah, Grandma would hand make flour tortillas, and they'd eat beans and rice all the time. That was their bread and butter, because that's what they could afford for all them kids.
Yeah. Well, that sounds pretty good to me. Your dad, is a musician. And was a big influence on you. Was that something that came out of, a musical family on his side? Or did he really kind of strike out on his own?
From the stories that I've heard, basically it was my grandpa teaching my uncle how to play guitar. And then when my dad was a kid, he just beat on everything. He'd beat on all the pots and pans. And then finally one day, my grandpa took him to get a drum kit, and he's been playing in bars since he was 12. I mean,
wow.
If
really?
Not younger. Yeah, my dad's got an interesting life. I need to put him on the podcast and start asking him questions, because there's so much that I don't even know. But
you do.
He's working.
Yeah,
I know quite a bit, but goodness, yeah, he's been playing in bars since he was 12. He's been working construction since he was 14. But really, what happened is he got really good at drums, but he was also a fantastic football player, and he had scholarships to even go to OU and stuff like that. But he ended up getting a scholarship to Panhandle State full ride, and he ended up going and trying out for Reba McEntire's brother's band. He ended up getting the part, but he was like, I didn't think I was going to get it. I just wanted to come and try out. And he said, I think I'm going to go for a full ride scholarship. And thank God he did, because I don't think he would have ever met my mom, and I would never be born. But, he always told me, college, they'll take your money at whatever age. They love taking money. So it came a lot easier for me to come home and tell them that I was dropping out, just because I watched how he always wanted to go and play. And he even had a time period where there was a layoff coming, and him and mom even talked about moving out to Nashville so he could become a studio drummer, because that's really what he wanted to do. And his friends got laid off. He ended up not, and he stayed right there with mom. But it doesn't, I still see it of him wanting to live out that dream. And it's crazy, because nowadays all of his buddies that he played with, they all sit there and they go, you're living our dream now. And one of his bass players, Joe, who got me my first ever electric Strat and a whole bunch of music gear that without I don't think I'd be here. But we were talking to him one night. He's from Okarche, Oklahoma. I think I've seen him there. And he goes, I finally realized that we did everything that we did, bringing you up on stage when you were a kid and everything like that, so that way you could go on and live out the dream. And that, oh man, hearing that, that'll stop you right in your tracks. But yeah, Dad, he lived out his dream of everything that he has with mom, but it made it so much easier for me to come home and be like, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to drop out. I'm going to figure it out. And watching them two be so supportive of it all is really great, because there was a time period where he was like threatening me. He was like, if you don't go to college, learn blah, 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 blah. And I was like, uh-oh. And I was like, well, I already made my decision. I just haven't told you yet. Good Lord.
How do you communicate with your dad when it comes to music?
Well, usually when we finally get to hang out with each other, we'll just sit there and we'll just listen to music and then just start talking. And then we'll talk for a good solid 4 hours until the better end of the night starts ending. And we'll just either talk about songs and he'll ask questions and then I'll ask questions. And we just kind of go back and forth and either dissect something or just appreciate how good the music is of whatever we're listening to. And then when I bring him new stuff, I just sit there and sing it for him and see what he thinks. And then when I bring home studio stuff, and we'll just sit down and listen, and he'll just be like, so what's going on here? What was the decision here? And just, I don't know. I enjoy it so much when me and him get to finally sit down and just talk music. Because that's how it all started, was him playing drums, and we built like this stage out with all this stuff, and he'd always make me sing with my back against him. And I think that's the only thing that prepared me for when I actually started going out and playing shows, and then started, playing with bands and stuff like that, was all the practice that we did when I was in like high school and junior high of, having a PA and trying to make a dream come to life. But I didn't realize that he was trying to set me up for success by doing so.
You talked about, maybe having him on your podcast at some point. And, I realized as I was getting ready for this interview that I'm talking to a professional here, that you got your own podcast, and you have for a while, and I've listened to some of them, and it's super fun and, kind of laid back. And I'm wondering what that's been like for you as an outlet. Have you enjoyed having those conversations, that, you might not otherwise have?
Yeah. Starting your own podcast is way different than being a part of a podcast, is what I've had to find out, because that is way different when I got to come up with the questions. And yeah, some of them were just purely just fun, having a good time, like Evan Honer and getting to talk to Aaron Ratier. Just went all over the place. But for some of them, it was very educational for myself. Definitely having Josh Kretschmer come up and talk, and then especially one of my heroes, Mike McClure from the Great Divide Band. It was one of those things where it was like I finally get to like ask these questions that I've wanted to ask my entire life. But in every setting, it's usually, they're fixing to go on stage, and that's not a good time to talk. And then they get done playing, and that's not really a good time to talk either. And to finally sit down and kind of talk about music with them. And it just kind of opened my eyes being on the other side of things, changed my perspective. And I really enjoyed doing the podcast, and I'm sure we're going to start that thing back up before too long. But it was kind of just a test experiment, because I kept saying, one of these days I'm going to do a podcast. And then it happened, and I was like, well, now we know, because I don't know. I'm trying to do as many things in my life that I can, and I believe that life is full of experiences, and that we need to have them. And I'm very grateful that I got to start my own podcast, because we tried a couple hodgepodge times and they were a little raunchy. I'm looking at one of my managers, because he was even a host on it at one point. And
there's some fun ones, and I hope you ramp it up again.
yeah, I got to get my dad on there for sure.
You definitely do. So, Wyatt, you've been pretty open about some of your struggles with mental health, and obviously this is something that millions of people deal with in different ways. And I'm wondering what you hear from your fans when it comes to mental health, when you have a chance to interact with them, because I would guess that there are lots and lots of people who have, seen what you've been through, who've heard it in your music. And it's got to be resonating with a lot of your fans in a very real way.
It's been still trying to figure that out, because when I first openly talked about it, like, I wrote Please Don't Go, recorded it like 2 months later, and then we put it out. But even my manager at that time, he didn't even know what the song was fully about until I said, hey, no, this is actually what I'm talking about in this song. And then I finally was vocal about it on social media. The song popped off, and I just kept being vocal about it. I don't think I've ever had a problem with sharing how I feel, but I didn't realize what door that would open on the other side of things. And I kept talking about mental health and trying to help others. And I was always trying to help others, and I was never taking care of myself in the early days of everything, because there's a lot of that happened. I mean, fire old management, lose everything. Next week after that, my grandpa commits suicide. Then I start my first headlining tour, and it was a lot. There was no doubt there was going to be a time where I needed to take a step back, and I finally did, because I couldn't deal with the emotions of myself and my own mental health, and I couldn't deal with the pressure of having everyone rely on me and be, because this thing is a business. I am feeding my band. I am feeding everyone that's in my team, and there's a lot on me back then of just being, freshly 22 years old, and I got to figure this entire thing out. And then I compartmentalized everything that had happened with my grandpa and management and everything like that, and losing people in my life, and whether actually dead or still alive. It's a tough thing to deal with, and then being there for the fans, and every night hearing another traumatic story. If not, it was them telling me that they're so close to losing themselves too. And I finally took a small break of about 2 weeks and came back to it, and I've been learning ever since. But there for a while, I quit talking about mental health on stage, because I've been scared. I've been terrified of it. But here lately, it's all coming back to me, because I still have thousands of messages that come in of just talking about, what they've gone through or the stories that are going through. And I feel weird on stage, because I feel like there's a part of me that keeps talking about it. And I feel like people are probably like, okay, we get it, dude. But then at the same time, I see all that. I hear from the fans, and I know that there's people out there that are struggling, that are coming to the show looking to be healed by some way. And a lot of it, I hope, is just through the music and less of what I'm saying, just, talking wise. But it is a huge part. I've struggled with mental health since I was a kid. You know, I really don't tell anyone this, but like ever since I was a kid, I was a weird kid, and I'd get bullied and all that, and I've been lucky enough that I've been trying to work on myself and deal with those things. That I told someone the other day, you know, just opening up about it, and I was like, actually, I was drowned in a water fountain in front of everyone at school, and you know, that was kind of the time where I was like, I'm kind of worthless, is what I thought to myself, and I've been trying to fix that inside of myself, and it's only been helpful, and I'm hoping that I can use my platform to help others to work through whatever it is that they're going through in their present life or their past life or whatever they're fixing to go through. It's a huge part. And I don't believe that the music that I'm playing is all about beer drinking and partying. Of course, I want people to have a great time. Come to my shows, drink, whatever you want to do, blow off steam. But I want people to go back into their day-to-day lives and want more for themselves. I see so many people get comfortable and just not ever change anything. And I want to give people the hope and let them know that they have the power to live a better life. And that all starts within.
Yeah. I feel like so many of the songs that you've written speak for themselves. And, you know, without even saying anything, just the music itself
Thank you.
has got to be resonating with people in a powerful way. And and they're hearing what they need to hear without you even addressing it, you know?
That is definitely all I'm after.
Wyatt, I want to ask you about a couple songs and some of your music that's come out. It's so good, and I want to go back a couple of years to a song that you did that's a personal favorite of mine. It's called "Holes," and you know it sounds like a song that's about some tough times, but it's also it's such a beautiful song, and I just wanted to ask you what it meant to you at the time that you wrote it.
The setting of it was I just, you know, quit my job farming and ranching. I'd quit the road. I was basically living in Oklahoma and Florida and Nashville all at the same time, traveling back and forth to all three of those places, trying to make money welding, going home when I could to see the ones that I love, and then going to Nashville to try and make that dream come to life. But there was no money in Nashville. Music wasn't really working out, and the aspect of going down there and saying that there's a whole bunch of welding jobs, turns out there wasn't a whole bunch of welding jobs, so there wasn't a whole bunch of money there either. And I just felt like I was just stuck. And that song means a lot to me. And the album cover of it too is actually a picture of my family sitting on front porch of a trailer house, and it was just me thinking about the generations that came before me. My grandparents were immigrant workers. The only vacations my dad ever went on was to go pick more tomatoes or cotton, either in, you know, Florida or California, because that's where the other families were, and that was their vacations, was loading up and doing more work just with family members in a different place. And my dad always told me that every generation is supposed to do better, so that way the next generation can do better. And it's supposed to trickle down. And at that time in my life, I was in a household full of pop writers and stuff like that and rappers. And I was like, this ain't me. Why am I the oddball out? And what am I even doing? So I went upstairs, I looked outside the window, and I seen grass coming out of a sidewalk and just started writing. And I'm very grateful for that song because I didn't have nothing. I've worked so many jobs, and I've always just tried to hustle my way and build something that no one can take away from me. And at that time, I was kind of losing hope for it all.
Did that song feel like a breakthrough for you in some ways? Absolutely,
because sitting down and writing that song reaffirmed that I am a good songwriter, that I can do it. And that was the hope that I needed to keep pushing forward. And I never expected people to love it as much as they do, but that song means a lot to a lot more than just myself, I guess. and getting to play it live is freaking awesome because I see it in everyone else's eyes. That same look that I had too. And I don't know, it's nice because I don't feel so alone in my thoughts.
Yeah. Wyatt, you came out with Welcome to the Plains last year, and it's so good. And it found an audience right away. I think it was about the songwriting. It was about your voice. It was just about the kind of honesty of it all. It seemed just very honest and real and vulnerable and also a lot older than 23, than something that could have been written by a 23-year-old. But I want to ask you about a song called Oh Susanna. Has the line, I was a problem, over and over. And talk to me about what you were thinking when that one came to you.
So most of the album and most of the songs on it were written in January and December, but after the mental health break in April, while we were still recording the album, I just came to it, and me and David sat there and wrote it out. But the whole thought behind it is it's an apology to my fans, and it's also me learning, kind of what codependency was, and just calling myself out, which was like one of the more, I guess, eye-opening parts of songwriting too, is being able to be vulnerable with yourself. And that's still a tough thing. I'm struggling with it now in my writing of being truly vulnerable with myself. But in that time period, it was so easy, to call myself out and be like, I was a fool on drunken behavior. And cause that's what I was. I thought I was saving a whole bunch of lives. I thought I was doing 1,000 different other things to help the world out. And truth be told, I'm just me. And what I love about the I was a problem is that I was being so harsh on myself, but I guess to know that you're the problem and to call out the problem is the easiest way to start working on the problem and start the healing process. And yeah, that song is probably one of my favorites to sing live and to watch people sing it back and scream it. It's freaking awesome. But yeah, that song is just all about the fans, and it's an apology to them because, everyone took off with Please Don't Go, and it's like the part 2 to Please Don't Go, where I felt the need to tell everyone that, Please Don't Go was just for me, and then it was placed out for them. But Oh Susanna was a song written to my fans. It is for them.
Well, I don't know that they see it as an apology. I think they probably see it as more of a thank you.
That's a different way of looking at it. I like that.
So Wyatt, I want to ask you about one more, and it's it's more of a fun song. It's more of a true kind of country song, and it's called Falling Sideways.
Yeah.
And it's about the bad combination of maybe a little bit too much alcohol and being around someone who you make a bad decision with. But it's a fun song, and I know that one must get a good response. What does it feel like to sing that one for a crowd?
I still have yet to sing it for a crowd.
Oh, no kidding.
I know. Oh man. But the way that song came about is I wanted to try it. We're in Asheville, North Carolina, and that was the first place that we started recording. And I just told Bo, I was like, start playing something, anything. Let's write a song right here, right now. It took us 5 minutes to come up with that chorus. And then the rest of it took us a while to get the verses down. But it was crazy how fast it came to us. And the only thing is I was asking my A&R rep, Austin, I was like, give me a topic. All he did was say tasteful regrets. And I was like, I know what we're doing. And yeah, that song, the way it all turned out, it's like this weird psychedelic thing going on with the slide, and I loved it. But yeah, that song was too easy because really you just have that one person that sneaks back into your life, and you think that it's going to be different than the last time, and it's like, no, it happens every single time. And yeah, there was definitely one girl.
You just don't learn. You just don't learn.
No, there was definitely one girl in my life where I just could not learn. We were fire and gasoline, and man, yeah, that song was not too hard to write.
Well, sometimes the best ones are the easiest ones, right?
Absolutely.
Why, you've probably had some pretty serious out of body experiences over the last couple of years. You know, so much has happened so fast. When you think of, you know, all the performances, what's something that stands out as a real highlight? And maybe it's somebody that you met or sang with, who had been an idol of yours.
Well, I definitely have to say here recently, it was going to Australia and playing for 25,000 people 2 nights in a row. That was an out of body experience. That Australia, I could live there. I love them people so much. But the other one that really comes back to me is always Red Rocks. I got to open up for Turnpike Troubadours, who are my heroes, and to even be asked to open up for them, doesn't matter where, already meant enough to me, but then to be asked to open up at Red Rocks, that show, a whole bunch of people didn't know me, but by the end of it, we got a standing ovation full of 10,000 people. And I lost it. I was like, there's no way this is real right now. I thought I was just dreaming. And then I was just on cloud 9 for probably a week, but definitely after the show, I'm just sitting there. And all of a sudden, Evan comes up behind me, scared the hell out of me, slaps me on the back, and he goes, "You ready to sing Long Hot Summer Day?" And I was like, "I guess." And he's like, "What verse you want?" And I was like, I'll do the second verse. And he goes, No, Sierra's already got that one. You get the third. And I'm like, what was I even asked? But yeah, going up and singing that with them, and especially even, 2 weekends ago, going up in front of 45,000 people and singing 7 and 7 with them, and going back up and singing Alabama with Cross Canadian Ragweed it's hard to process that's real. That was real life, that happened, that I got to sing with my heroes at a sold out stadium in my backyard. It's hard to process anything these days because there's just so many things that have happened in such a short amount of time that people ask me, they're like, "What's it like?" And I'm like, I don't even know how to make anyone comprehend what is going on in my life because I can't even comprehend.
Well, that's your job now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I often ask the last question on this podcast. I'll ask people, what does it mean to you to be Southern? As someone who grew up in Oklahoma, has such a strong connection there, and then who's now moved back to Oklahoma, what does it mean to you to be an Oklahoman? What does it mean to you to be from that place?
I feel freedom every time I go home. I can drive for miles in any direction and just feel freedom. I've been on the plains. It's funny you say Southern because everyone's like, I don't know what really Oklahoma falls into. Is it the Midwestern? Is it Texas? And the more that I've traveled around, the more that I realize that we're all pretty much alike if we could all sit around a fire together. But what makes Oklahoma so different is the people, the way that we are raised, and our upbringing is rough around the edges, but we're also some of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And that's what it means to come from Oklahoma, because why I wrote Welcome to the Plains, it's kind of calling out the dirtier side of where I come from. It's not too hard to scratch the surface of history in Oklahoma and realize it's pretty messed up. And it's a hard place to live. You have tornadoes. We used to have a whole bunch of earthquakes back when they were fracking in 2010, and then also wildfires. And you don't get enough rain, And to come out of Oklahoma, you have to work harder than everyone else.
Well, keep doing what you're doing, and congrats on everything, Wyatt. You've had just a great run, and you're making some great music, and connecting with a lot of people, and hope you keep it up for a long time.
Thank you very much. That means a lot, and thank you for having me too.